Imagine for a second that you're 9 years old. You're growing up in Hawaii in the 1950s, and you have this really unique, almost confusing situation at home.
Mm-hmm.
You essentially have two fathers. Not literally, of course, but you have these two father figures who are the primary influences in your life.
And they hold just, diametrically opposing views on pretty much everything.
But especially money.
It almost sounds like the setup for a novel, doesn't it?
It really does. But this is the actual childhood experience of Robert Kiyosaki, and it forms the basis of the source material we are covering today. The transcript of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Right. So on one side, you've got his biological father.
This man is highly educated, holds a PhD, works for the government, but he constantly struggles. Just can't seem to make ends meet. He's the poor dad.
And on the other side, you have his best friend's dad. This man never even finished the 8th grade.
8th grade.
And he went on to become one of the wealthiest capitalists in Hawaii. He's the rich dad.
And the mission for this deep dive, it's not just to give you some, accounting tips or tell you to save on your morning latte.
No, not at all. We are looking at a fundamental shift in mindset. We want to help you move from that standard advice we all grew up with. Go to school, get a safe job, work hard.
Right, save your money.
All of that.
Yeah.
We're talking about moving from working for money to having money work for you.
Because, let's be honest, that feeling of working incredibly hard but never really getting ahead, that's a struggle almost everyone can relate to.
Oh, absolutely. It's that treadmill feeling.
It's the defining struggle of the middle class.
Exactly. And what we're going to do today is analyze the specific psychological and structural differences between the rich and everyone else as laid out in the text.
We aren't just looking at what they do with their wallets.
It's about what they do with their brains.
So let's unpack this. The difference in mindset, it starts with the language these two dads used. The source highlights this really specific linguistic trap. The poor dad, the PhD, would say things like, I can't afford it. It was just a definitive statement.
Yeah, it was a period at the end of the sentence. And that's the real danger.
How so?
Well, the source argues that when you say, I can't afford it, your brain just stops working. It shuts down. It's a statement of fact that lets you off the hook.
You don't have to do anything because, you can't afford it.
Exactly. Whereas the rich dad, he forbade those words. He insisted on asking, how can I afford it?
And what a difference. One's a statement, the other's a question.
A question forces your brain to think. It triggers your mind to search for solutions. It opens up possibilities. It's mental exercise versus, mental laziness.
And there's another huge contrast in their core philosophies, about morality and wealth. The poor dad believed the love of money is the root of all evil.
Which is a very common sentiment. We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
But the rich dad, he just flipped it.
He said, the lack of money is the root of all evil.
And that one idea, it really sets the stage for everything that follows. One views money as something to be, avoided or feared, almost like it's dirty.
Right. And the other views the absence of money as the cause of chaos, stress, and suffering.
Rich Dad just saw money as a tool, a form of power that you need to understand, not be afraid of.
Speaking of understanding money, we have to talk about the lead nickel story. This is the origin story of the author's financial education.
Oh, this is great.
So Kiyosaki is 9 years old, and he and his friend Mike decide they want to be rich. They take Rich Dad's advice to make money, a little too literally.
Laughing slightly. They really, really did.
They went around the neighborhood collecting old toothpaste tubes. Now, for our younger listeners, back in the 50s, these tubes weren't plastic, they were made of lead.
Yeah, can you imagine? So these kids build a fire, they're melting down these lead tubes, and then they're pouring the molten lead into plaster molds to cast their own nickels.
Talk about industrious, but also
Probably illegal.
Right. The poor dad would have probably grounded them for playing with fire and, toxic fumes. But the rich dad walks in, sees these two kids covered in white dust and ash.
And he doesn't scold them for the effort. He just calmly explains that what they are doing is called counterfeiting.
But, and this is the key moment, he praised their creativity.
He did. He told them, you're only poor if you give up. That failed experiment with the lead nickels, it was actually the launch pad for their whole apprenticeship.
That was the moment they stopped listening to the conventional advice and started learning how money actually works.
And that apprenticeship, it wasn't exactly glamorous.
No. Rich Dad put them to work in one of his convenience stores for 10 cents an hour, which even back then was absolute peanuts.
It was insulting pay.
Yeah.
And that was completely by design. The author worked for a few weeks, got fed up, and finally marched into Rich Dad's office to quit.
He demanded a raise.
And Rich Dad revealed that he was waiting for that exact reaction.
He was testing him.
Exactly. He wanted the boy to feel that anger. He wanted him to realize that working for a wage, trading your time for a set amount of money, is a trap. He called it a short-term solution to a long-term problem.
And this brings us right to the concept of the rat race. It's a phrase we hear all the time, but the source breaks it down psychologically.
Yes. Rich Dad explains that most people's lives are run by two emotions: fear and greed. First, there's fear.
The fear of not having money.
That fear wakes you up in the morning and makes you go to a job you might not even like. You have to pay the rent, you have to feed the kids. That's the fear driving the bus.
Okay, so that's fear. What about greed?
Right. So then you get paid. And for a moment, the fear subsides. And that's when the second emotion kicks in. Desire or greed. You have money in your pocket, and suddenly you think about all the things you can buy.
A new car, nicer clothes, a vacation. So you spend the money.
And then the money is gone.
And the fear comes back. So you go back to work. Get up, go to work, pay bills, repeat.
That is the rat race. Rich Dad's lesson was that if you don't master those emotions, even if you get rich, you're just a highly paid slave. The wheel is just spinning faster.
So how did the boys break out of it? The source describes their first real business success, and I love this because it's just so simple.
It's brilliant. They noticed that the distributor for the comic books at the store was just throwing away the old issues. He'd rip off the covers for credit and trash the rest of the books.
So the boys just asked for the comics, and the distributor said yes as long as they didn't resell them.
So they couldn't sell them.
But they could rent them.
Precisely. They opened a library in Mike's basement. They hired Mike's sister to run it. And they charged kids 10 cents admission to come in and read as many comics as they wanted for 2 hours.
Which was a great deal because comics cost 10 cents each back then.
It was a fantastic value proposition.
Huh.
But the magic wasn't the comics. The magic was that the boys were making money while they weren't even there.
They were at school or playing baseball, and the business was still generating cash.
That is the aha moment.
That is money working for them. They leveraged an asset, those discarded comics, and created a system.
That leads us directly to the technical core of the book. The source says there's really only one rule you need to know to get out of the rat race.
Just one.
Just one. You have to know the difference between an asset and a liability.
Okay, now I know we have some listeners who are accountants or have business degrees. The source warns that you might need to suspend your traditional definitions here, right?
Absolutely. Forget the confusing balance sheets you learned in school. Rich Dad simplifies it right down to cash flow. Here is the definition. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket.
And a liability.
A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
It sounds almost too simple. But here is where it gets controversial. The source explicitly says that for most people, their house is not an asset. It's a liability.
I can feel the tension just saying that. It goes against the entire American dream. We're all told our home is our biggest investment.
Right. But it appreciates in value. That's what everyone screams, I have equity.
True, it might appreciate. But apply the Rich Dad logic of cash flow. Does your house put money in your pocket every single month?
No. It takes money out. You've got the mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, maintenance.
The new roof, the lawn care. Even if you earn it outright, the government still taxes you on it. It is a constant cash drain. Therefore, by his definition, it's a liability.
So just to be clear, is he saying don't buy a house?
No, not at all. He's saying don't call it an asset if it's taking money from you. And more importantly, don't buy a huge, expensive liability like a massive house until you have enough assets to pay for it.
It's about the order of operations.
Exactly. The source outlines a pattern. The poor have expenses. Every dollar that comes in goes right back out. The middle class buys liabilities that they think are assets.
The big house, the boat, the luxury car, all financed with debt.
But the rich, they buy assets first.
Things like stocks, bonds, intellectual property, rental real estate.
Things that generate income. And once that asset column is spitting out enough cash, then they use that income to buy the luxury house or the Porsche. The asset pays for the luxury.
The middle class tries to pay for the luxury with their own sweat and blood.
And that connects directly to the next big concept. Mind your own business. And he doesn't mean being nosy.
No, he's making a distinction between your profession and your business.
This is a nuance a lot of people miss. Your profession is what you do for a wage. If you're a banker, banking is your profession. But your business in the language of the source, is what is happening in your asset column.
There is a legendary anecdote about Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, that perfectly illustrates this. He was speaking to a class of MBA students, and he asked them, "What business am I in?"
And everyone just laughed, because obviously Ray Kroc is the hamburger guy. They said, "Ray, you're in the restaurant business."
And he told them they were wrong.
He said, "No, my business is real estate." Ray Kroc knew that the burger was just the vehicle. The real business was owning the land under the franchise.
So the franchise pays for the land, and McDonald's became one of the largest real estate owners in the world.
He minded his business real estate while his profession was managing a franchise system.
That is just mind-blowing when you really think about it. Now, another major factor that keeps people from building that asset column, the thing that eats away at wealth more than anything else, is taxes.
Taxes are the biggest expense for most people. The source goes into a bit of a history lesson here that's really fascinating. It talks about the Robin Hood myth.
Right. We tend to think taxes have always been there. But originally, in England and the US, there were no regular income taxes.
Correct. Taxes were only levied on the rich to pay for specific things, usually wars. And the middle class and the poor, they voted for these taxes because they liked the idea of taxing the rich to pay for the country.
It's the Robin Hood theory: take from the rich, give to the poor.
But the government gets hungry.
It always does. The government's appetite for money grew, the bureaucracy expanded, and eventually that tax bracket just crept down and down.
Until it hit the middle class and even the poor.
Yep.
The very people who voted for the tax ended up paying the price.
But the rich didn't just sit there and take it. They found a loophole.
Well, not so much a loophole as a tool. This is the corporate secret. The rich found ways to protect their wealth using corporations.
And a corporation isn't necessarily a big building with a logo on it.
No, it's a legal document. It's a file folder in an attorney's office. And it completely changes the math of how you spend your money.
How so?
Okay, here's the formula. If you're an employee, the sequence is you earn money, the government taxes you, and then you try to live on what is left. Earn, tax, spend.
You're spending 60 or 70-cent dollars. It's painful.
But a corporation flips it. A corporation earns, spends everything it can on expenses, and then pays tax on what is left. Earn, spend, tax.
So if you own a corporation, things like car payments, insurance, even health club memberships, if they're structured correctly, can be pre-tax business expenses.
Exactly. You're paying for your life with pre-tax dollars. It's a massive advantage that the rich use to keep their asset column growing, while the middle class is paying income tax before they even see their paycheck.
Moving on, the source talks about how the rich invent money. This sounds like magic, but it's really about what Kiyosaki calls financial IQ.
Right, and financial IQ isn't just one thing. It's described as the synergy of 4 specific skills. Accounting, which is reading the numbers, investing the science of making money, understanding market supply and demand, and the law, knowing those tax advantages we just talked about.
And when you combine those, you see opportunities others just miss. The source gives some real estate examples, like buying a $75,000 house for $20,000 at a bankruptcy court.
And the important detail there isn't just the price. It's that the author didn't even have the $20,000. He used his knowledge to lock up the deal with a contract.
And then he found the money.
He found a partner or a lender. Because the deal itself was so good, he created value with his mind, not his wallet.
He created equity out of thin air. The average person sees a for sale sign and checks their savings account. If it's empty, they walk away.
But the financially literate person sees the potential, creates the deal structure, and invents the money.
And to get to that level, you have to adopt a specific philosophy about your career. Work to learn, don't work for money.
This is a tough one for high achievers to swallow. We're trained to specialize, get a degree, become a specialist, charge high fees. But Rich Dad says that's actually dangerous. He suggests taking jobs for what they can teach you, not just what they pay.
There's the story of the newspaper reporter. She was a brilliant writer, technically superior. She told the author she wanted to be a best-selling novelist, but her books just weren't selling.
And Robert suggested she take a sales training course.
And she was offended. She practically stormed out. She thought sales was beneath her. She was a serious writer.
She let her arrogance get in the way. Kiyosaki pointed to his own book cover. It says, best-selling author, not best writing author.
He freely admits he's a mediocre writer.
But he's a phenomenal salesman.
That distinction between best-selling and best writing is sharp.
It highlights that great talent often isn't enough. You need the skills to sell that talent. The source calls the specialized job the JOB, just over break.
If you only have one specialized skill, you're vulnerable.
But if you learn sales, marketing, communication, you become adaptable. You can build a system.
So we have the mindset, we have the definitions, we understand the tax game, but the source warns that even people who know all this stuff still get stuck. There are 5 major obstacles: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance.
Let's start with fear.
Specifically, the fear of losing money. It's primal. The source contrasts how most people handle fear with how Texans handle it. He calls it the remember the Alamo attitude.
I loved this part, the idea that Texans don't bury their failures.
Right. The Alamo was a military disaster. They got wiped out, but they turned it into a rallying cry. Remember the Alamo.
Exactly. The source quotes Fran Tarkenton. Winning means being unafraid to lose. The rich aren't fearless. They just handle fear differently. They know that losing is part of the process of winning.
If you play it so safe to avoid losing, you also avoid winning.
Then there is cynicism, the chicken little mentality. The sky is falling.
We all have that voice inside us, or we have friends who tell us, that won't work, or if it's such a good idea, why isn't everyone doing it?
The source uses the example of real estate. People always say, I don't want to buy rental property because I don't want to fix toilets.
And the rich dad's response was classic, I don't want to fix them either.
Exactly. That's why he hires a property manager.
Yeah.
The cynic uses toilets as an excuse to do nothing. The winner analyzes the problem and finds a solution, hiring a manager that allows them to still make the investment.
Cynics criticize, winners analyze.
What about laziness? Because the source argues that busy people are often the laziest.
That's a paradoxical idea.
It is. You could be busy working 60 hours a week, busy watching TV, busy shopping, all to avoid doing the important work of taking care of your wealth or your health. It's busyness as avoidance.
So what's the cure?
The source says the cure for this kind of laziness is a little greed.
Greed. Usually we're told greed is bad.
He reframes it. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, which creates sadness and passivity, you should ask, what's in it for me if I can afford it? You need to tap into that desire for a better life.
So a little desire to motivate you to get off the couch and learn something new.
Exactly. And then we have bad habits. This goes back to the payment structure.
The pay yourself first principle.
Most people pay their bills first. The landlord, the phone company, the tax man, and then save whatever is left.
Which is usually nothing.
Rich Dad said you should pay yourself first. Put money into your asset column, even if you're short on money.
That sounds crazy and stressful.
It is. But his logic was that if you pay yourself first, and then you don't have enough for the creditors, the pressure from those creditors will scream at you. It will be uncomfortable.
The tax man is scary.
Right. And that fear, that pressure will force you to hustle. It will force you to be creative and find new income to pay the bills. If you pay yourself last, there's no pressure. You stay comfortable, but you end up broke.
It's about using pressure to build financial muscle. I see the logic. And finally, arrogance.
What I know makes me money. What I don't know loses me money. The source says arrogance is just ego trying to hide ignorance. When you're arrogant, you think what you don't know doesn't matter.
But in finance, what you don't know will absolutely cost you.
You have to be humble enough to admit ignorance and find an expert.
So bringing this all together, we are looking at a journey from that lead nickel mindset, thinking you can just make money without understanding it, to developing a true financial IQ.
It really is about literacy. It's about understanding that wealth isn't about working harder. It's about controlling those emotions of fear and greed and building that asset column.
So that eventually the assets buy the luxuries and you aren't stuck in the rat race forever.
It's a shift from being a passive participant in the economy to an active one. From being just an employee to being an investor or a business owner.
And realizing that job security is really an illusion, but financial intelligence is real power.
There's one final thought from the source that I found really provocative.
Yeah.
It mentions that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Yes, it's a reminder against that arrogance we just talked about. The final thought for you, the listener, is this. Are you using your mouth to argue against new ideas?
Are you saying, I can't do that, or that won't work?
Or are you using your ears? Are you listening for the formula? Are you listening for the opportunities that everyone else is missing?
Because the opportunities are there.
They are. But you have to be quiet enough and humble enough to hear them.
A lot to think about. That is it for this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Thanks for listening.
Keep learning.